Hi, Dave.
Hi Hayden, how are you?
I'm really, really good.
What are you doing at the moment?
I'm just working.
What else have you been doing? Have you been doing your Pokemon Go?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I went out for a big Pokemon Go walk this morning.
What did you catch?
There's a few different Pokemon out now from the Galar region. They've got names like Score Bunny or something. There's a few Clefairies out there as well. I'm trying to think if there was anything good. A Gastrodon, which was quite exciting because it's quite a high ranking one for player versus player or PvP.
How old are you?
39.
Okay, I had a question for the podcast. We're doing an episode about Seventh day Adventists, and I'm going to look into their, what I understand to be sort of American origins. I was just wondering if you knew anything about Seventh day Adventists and whether we have them in New Zealand?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I don't know how big they are, but I was aware of them. I grew up Baptist like you, so I'm pretty across the various Christian sects that we consider to be heretics. And I think they're probably in the heretic category a little bit. But the main thing I know about them is that they have church on Saturday instead of Sunday, which is a big no-no, and probably was the root cause of their schism from what I would consider to be the real church to the Saturday church.
Is there anything else you know about Seventh day Adventists?
I don't know too much about their beliefs. To me, if I had to kind of rank them, it would be like the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses on one level, where they have sort of special underwear and some really, I don't want to be insulting, but like some relatively wacky stuff in the theology. And then they're probably in the middle. Like it's the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, and then the Seventh Day Adventists are somewhere a little bit below them on the wacky scale. And then you have the way more normal churches like Baptists that just believe that a guy was born to a virgin and rose again from the dead after the third day, which is a perfectly normal thing to believe.
I'm David Farrier, a New Zealander accidentally marooned in America, and I want to figure out what makes this country tick. Now, a while ago, back in episode 81, I went to Loma Linda, a town with the longest life expectancy in the whole of the United States. I wanted to know why people there lived for so long, and I found out the town was pretty much run by the Seventh day Adventist religion.
I want to be really clear that we are not saying people should become Seventh day Adventists.
To be honest, that episode raised more questions than it did answers. Questions about the Seventh day Adventists. And it's to this religion that we turn to today, because this particular breed of Christianity was created in America, rapidly becoming one of the fastest growing churches on planet Earth. So it's no surprise the church's influence on American culture has appeared in other Flightless Bird episodes. It was a Seventh day Adventist who helped kick off America's obsession with circumcision, and it was a Seventh day Adventist who invented the humble cornflake, a food so bland it was meant to stop boys masturbating. Really, that's why cornflakes were invented. Episode 11. Today, Seventh day Adventists have 22 million baptized members worldwide. That's a lot of people that have been dunked underwater. So, with that in mind, get ready to argue about different doctrines, the nature of hell and eternity, and what the best diet is, because this is the Seventh day Adventist episode.
Flightless, flightless, flightless bird touchdown in America. I'm a flightless bird touchdown in America.
Hey Rob, how are you?
Oh boy, we're doing Seventh day Adventists today, huh?
We're doing Seventh day Adventists. It's a meaty topic, a lot of confusion in my own mind about who they are and what they're about, but here we are.
Yeah, I think it might be worth touching on both of our religious backgrounds.
I think this is super fair because I think with any religious topic, you come in with your own baggage and worldview, and we might as well get that out on the table.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this probably at length before, off mic.
It comes up. It's also one of the biggest things in the universe to talk about, so I imagine we've talked about it in little bits, but not in depth, right?
No, but I think we both come from similar backgrounds.
Yeah, I was raised Baptist along in a similar way with Hayden, who you heard from at the beginning of that episode. Hayden's one of my oldest friends. We both went to journalism school together and instantly got into conflict when we both talked about Avril Lavigne in journalism class. We had some debate and we both picked the same topic. We've been at war ever since.
You were pro Avril? And he was anti?
Yeah, I think he was anti, I was pro.
Okay.
But we picked very similar sort of arguments in a weird way, despite that. Anyway, like Hayden, I was raised Baptist, kind of old school Christianity. So I grew up believing the earth was 10,000 years old. If I sinned too much, I'd go to hell, which was an actual place where you'd sort of burn for all eternity. Sort of left Christianity or started leaving. Once I went to university, I met a bunch of other people and worldviews and just came to the conclusion that why am I the one that's right? And why are all these people wrong? Like I met people that were objectively better people than me. You know, they were just better people and they didn't believe what I believed. And so I just slowly, well, actually quite quickly drifted away. And now I'm a happy agnostic, which is kind of like a lazy atheist.
Were you a weekly churchgoer then up until university?
Yeah, our family would go on a Sunday and it felt like a bit of a chore. It was always like a bit like, oh man, we've got to go and do this thing. But I was into it. And then, you know, I went to a Christian high school and, you know, by the time I was 17 in my final year of school, I was the head. Do you call them prefects in America or head boys?
You were the head boy?
I was the head boy, which
the
is
head
sort of
boy at the Christian school?
Yeah. Is that like, it sounds like sexual, right? Head boy?
I mean,
yeah, I was head boy.
bit.
That's what we call it in New Zealand. And I would pray to open assembly. That's how into it I was. Wow. And so I was deeply embedded. I believed I was going to heaven, and if you didn't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. And I walked around thinking that. Actually, I converted a few people, and I've had this fantasy about a doc series I want to make where I find those people I converted, and I know a few of them. I look them up in the yearbook, and they are still really intense Christians.
Devout.
They're raising intense Christian children, and I sort of had this fantasy of turning up to their house and be like, remember me when I was 15? I converted you to this. I got it wrong.
Yeah, the documentary is you trying to unconvert
them.
It's a great premise.
It's a good premise, right? And, you know, I know their names. It wouldn't take long to find out where they all are. Anyway, I just need to decide whether I want to disrupt people's lives that much. But the idea is it just creates a debate between me and them, and we can talk out about why we believe what we believe. And I think I got it wrong. They now are still believing what I used to believe.
Because of you.
Because of me.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, if anyone from HBO is listening to this, let me know. What about you?
So I grew up in a very religious family. My dad went to seminary school to become a priest, and he left because he wanted to start a family.
Incredible.
So every Saturday or Sunday, our church did have Saturday Mass. We were not.
This is fascinating.
We were not Seventh-day Adventists, but there was a 4:30 and 6 o'clock Mass. It was just a Catholic Christian church. I generally was just kind of indifferent about church and religion. It was just from a young age.
So it's just something you did.
I hated waking up early for Sunday Mass, if that's the one we went. It was more about that than it was anything. And then just being bored at Mass. But our church was a little more modern. They had music. I've been to those more
happy,
structured,
clappy,
dull. It was
the dull version. Yeah.
Ours was more the happy, clappy one.
Cool.
My mom plays the flute at the church still.
Oh, that's really adorable.
So she goes to 2-3 masses a week.
You're right. So your parents are still deep in. What are you now? Are you agnostic? Are you still religious? What would you say?
I would say agnostic. If I had to say, I'm probably more atheist, but I don't want to be.
Yeah. See, the thing with me is I don't feel I can step in and be like, I definitely know there is no God. I don't know.
Right.
There might be something going on. I just don't know what it is.
I'm on the same, but if I had to make a bet, I would be, but I would love to be wrong about that too.
100%.
Because the idea of that actually being the case terrifies me.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do a future Flightless Bird about sort of death duelers and death dueling and death, and I think we both have a similar attitude towards being slightly scared of death, I think because we grew up thinking there was an afterlife, and that got taken away from us.
And I went through all of the churching. I got my first communion.
Wow.
And then my parents told me once I got confirmed in the church, which was 8th grade, and I was an adult in the church at that point, and I could choose whether or not I went to Mass anymore. And that was the last time I went to Mass.
Incredible.
My confirmation.
I was raised believing that Catholics were really bad. My belief system was that Catholics were kind of evil. Baptists, we didn't like the Catholics. It was just a whole different belief system, and we found it deeply offensive that you worshipped Mary. I thought growing up, it's all about Mary. It's not about Jesus. And so it's just such a weird thing. I grew up thinking Catholics were almost as bad as, I don't know, Satanists or something. It was a real rift. That's what I believed when I was a kid, which is so funny now.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I know they talked about the Virgin Mary a lot in the church. I don't think that was necessarily a giant focus.
And also, it's amazing. You respect a woman. That's great.
There was the mega churches in the neighborhood.
Okay.
We were one step down from mega church.
Okay.
It was a big church where I think it was 1,000 people at a mass.
Yeah, right.
And I do remember they ended up for the church getting this giant crystal cross with Jesus coming out of it with his hand.
Oh, sort of emerging from the cross.
Like the size of a car, though, that was strung up from the rafters of the church above the altar.
Incredible. That's beyond epic. I mean, that's incredible. That sounds amazing.
But it wasn't the Virgin Mary. And then, so the other thing I remember about church, so a lot of my memories of it are not of the actual teachings.
Yeah, not the beliefs, not a fear of hell.
I mean, I did have that.
Setting.
And I think I did have the shame thing that just having other friends that are religious that have grown out of it, I can relate to, and I think we relate to.
Shame's the most fun thing that religion leaves you with.
I loved communion. I loved the communion wafers.
Yeah.
They were so delicious.
It's like a little treat that you get, right? Because, we'd have communion as well, and it would be these little glasses, and you had fruit juice in there, right, instead of wine.
I think they gave wine to the kids.
Okay.
But I don't know how much alcohol is actually in the wine they were using there.
What I love about communion, in my understanding of the Catholic faith, is that there's, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like transmutation or something, where when you drink that wine and the bread, it actually turns into the blood once you've got it down your gullet. And so it is actually essentially cannibalism. That's what some Catholics believe, which I love.
Well, yeah, it's the body of Christ and then the blood of Christ.
It's such intense stuff to be doing, though. Yeah, it's such an intense belief.
But that's what I mean. As a kid, I was aware of it, but the connection wasn't there.
Okay. So we both come into this topic with a little bit of baggage. I'm wondering if you had any Seventh-day Adventist friends, because I didn't growing up. They exist in New Zealand, but they're not a big thing.
No, I don't mean, but also when we weren't really talking about what denomination of Christianity, I could have played soccer with the Seventh-day Adventist for all I knew.
You just wouldn't know.
But we weren't talking about which denomination of Christianity
we
were.
You coming into this topic, I felt incredibly confused. And as well as talking to Hayden, who is quite across different religions, I also talked to my friend Dan, and I just wanted to play what he said to me because he shares my confusion going into this topic about what exactly a Seventh-day Adventist is.
I think Seventh-day Adventists, isn't it another name for Mormons?
No, they're different. They're different things, I think.
Are they Jehovah's Witnesses?
I think they're different to them as well. They're their own thing, I think, but I might be wrong.
I think one of those denominations was renamed or rebranded at some point, but I might be wrong. But yeah, no, I don't know anything really about Seventh-day Adventists apart from my confusion over whether they're either Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses that have rebranded as something else.
So there was a bit of confusion in New Zealand. I also went out and talked to a bunch of Americans, and I would generally say the theme was confusion as well. I mean, this isn't a giant sample size. I talked to about 10 people, but they all basically said this. The Seventh-day Adventist religion. Yes. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. They're a, sect, cult of offshoot from Christianity, I think. There's something about the end of the world or the apocalypse or something like that.
Nothing to add, no notes.
Not really. Okay. Although I was raised in the Baptist church, so I know a little bit about, some religion.
Nope, no clue.
Have you heard of them?
Is it a subsect of Christianity?
I think so. I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, I think it is a subsect of Christianity, but that's all I know. That's kind of offhand.
See, it was pretty vague, despite it being a lot of people in the religion, a lot of people, if you're not in it, you don't know.
Well, I think denominations in general are just confusing. Like even me, I can't tell you if we went to a Catholic or a Christian church.
Yeah, they're sort of the same thing in your mind.
And I know one is bigger than the other and one is a denomination.
And also, when I think about what type of Baptist I was, there's probably specifics within that I don't even recognize. And I write a lot of things about religion. So weird.
Yeah, and you really only hear about the crazy denominations, like the Westboro Baptist Church.
The ones that go out on a weird tangent and suddenly get news coverage because they're picketing people's funerals.
Yeah, the more extreme ones, for sure.
The thing that did keep coming up a few times with the Seventh-day Adventists, and it's where we originally started talking about it when we were doing the Loma Linda, is like, are they a cult? How culty is it? And that's something that I get into in the documentary to try and figure out, because that was definitely something that comes up again and again. Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Support for Flightless Bird comes from Quince. Now, it's been a busy season of travel. I was back in New Zealand recently, and my wardrobe has taken a beating, as in I accidentally left some of it behind. A total overhaul isn't in my budget, but I'm replacing some of those things that I don't have anymore with affordable, high-quality essentials from Quince. Recently on there, I've been getting a bunch of activewear. I got a puffer jacket that I left back in New Zealand. I needed that. And yeah, I love this place. It's just full of so much good stuff. And they also have sofas on there. I need a new sofa, and now I'm looking at those on Quince. Anyway, Quince has all the seasonal must-haves like cashmere sweaters from $50, 100% European linen shirts, and versatile activewear, which is the stuff that I like. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And by partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the costs of the middleman and passes the savings on to you and me. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices along with premium fabrics and finishes. Right now, as I read this, I am in my Quince shorts because I'm about to go on a big walk, and this activewear is really, really good. Upgrade your wardrobe with pieces made to last with Quince. Go to quince.com/bird for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/bird to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bird. Flightless Bird is sponsored by BetterHelp. Now, what's something that you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that completely lost when you stopped being a kid? Because kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity completely. For me, I feel like with this show, I'm learning constantly. Like right now, I'm learning about how slime was sort of invented in America. You know, the stuff that kids play with, and that's now sold to kids all over the world and also adults to help with their stress and ASMR needs. Basically, learning is about a sense of wonder at the world around us. And therapy is something that can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because, as I found out with this show, your back to school era can come out at any age. Therapy for me has been pretty great over the last few years, just helping me put things in perspective to balance out the stress of being an adult, with a reminder that life can also be pretty fun if you let it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to whatever your schedule is. You just fill out a really quick questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/bird today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/bird. Should we get into this journey?
Yeah, I think let's find out.
I have to be honest, back when we did our Loma Linda episode, I got scared. Because as we discussed the possible health benefits of being a Seventh-day Adventist, vegetarian diet, and an emphasis on exercise, we also touched on some more negative aspects.
One of the stories in the cult episode of Armchair Anonymous was a Seventh-day Adventist
Trying
situation, and it was rough.
Right. Didn't like them leaving. the community.
They murdered her mom.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
allegedly.
Now, after each weekly episode of Flightless Bird goes out, we get a fair amount of feedback. A lot of it yelling at me for getting various things wrong. Thinking Rhode Island was an actual island, or saying de-thaw when I meant to say defrost. But talking smack about religion made me genuinely worried. I dreaded hearing from even a tiny proportion of the 22 million baptized members who'd no doubt be horrified at the episode. Well, I did hear from a lot of people, the most people that have ever responded to an episode. And yeah, they were Seventh-day Adventists, but they weren't angry. They were the complete opposite. It was just hundreds of DMs from members going, "Great episode, we liked it. Why don't you come and learn more when you want to? This is my email address, this is my number, blah blah blah." There was no anger or animosity or talking down to me. And I even heard from the bigwigs. Over on Instagram, the official Adventist church account messaged me saying, "We're open to any and all questions. We have a lot we could offer up if you're open to it." I was delighted. And sure, a cynical part of me was going, they just want to convert me. But then another part was going, good on them. You certainly wouldn't get that kind of response from, say, Scientology.
I liked your take on Loma Linda. Going on Sunday was pretty funny. The whole thing was shut.
So, one afternoon I found myself talking to Sam Neves, the Associate Director of Communication for the Seventh-day Adventists. Sam grew up in the religion in Brazil, and now heads the comms department in the religion's motherland, America. Now, something I found truly remarkable, we put our episode out about Loma Linda, and we usually get feedback to episodes, but very quickly I heard from a load of people from the church being like, hey, let's talk. It was so quick, and so you're very efficient.
Well, good. I'm glad that's working out.
I've met Sam outside an AMC theatre, so right now we're sitting quite close to a giant statue of Batman. Very American. We've met here because there's a Seventh-day Adventist movie playing at the cinema called The Hopeful. The blurb on AMC's website says, "This sweeping drama, set in 19th century New England, invites audiences of all ages to imagine how hope can change the world." But before we go and watch that hopeful film, he begins by clearing a few things up about that Loma Linda episode, including how Seventh-day Adventists feel about eating meat.
It's interesting that for 150 years or so, we've been discouraging meat, although it's not a requirement in the religion. So I eat meat, for example, and many Adventists do. Same with coffee. Now I stopped coffee and sugar. But there is a hard line for Adventists, which is the biblical text. So we're very Jewish in that sense. Leviticus 11 has some pretty strict regulations of what you can eat and what you cannot eat. Clean meats and unclean meats. So that's kind of a hard line. So Adventists that eat pork, that's really not good. But between that and being a vegan on the other end, there is a great deal of ground to cover.
And spoiler alert, a great deal of ground to cover sort of covers my conversation with Sam. Maybe I was a fool to think I could quickly summarize what this religion was about. But of course, talking with a religious expert about their religion doesn't make for great podcasting because you're sort of talking a different language. And so a lot of our conversation just sort of went like this. Okay, let's do a scenario. You and I both die. I don't believe in, at the moment, in any of this. You do. What happens to my soul long term and what happens to yours long term?
Well, first there is this temptation to decide who lives forever and who doesn't, who makes it and who doesn't, based on beliefs. And by beliefs, we often mean the articulated version of how we see the world. So a set of propositions. And those that have the right propositions go to heaven and live forever, and those that have the wrong propositions, well, they don't make it.
But I guess the main thing I learned about the religion from Sam is that they believe the Sabbath is on a Saturday, their seventh day of the week, and the Advent bit means Jesus is coming back to earth. Speaking of which, Adventists embrace the afterlife, but aren't big on heaven up in the clouds. Instead, God's eventually going to come down to earth and make it heaven down here. That's why Adventists focus on looking after this planet and our own bodies, because we don't get to just take off to heaven at the end.
And this is a foundational point to understand Adventism. Adventism believes the Bible ends with heaven coming to earth. So it's this earth that will be renewed and restored. God has not given up on the world.
This is why the religion puts such a big emphasis on health, because according to Adventists, it's not like believers are abandoning Earth and getting whisked off to the clouds in heaven. No, God is just going to come down to Earth, give it a bit of a revamp, and hang out down here.
Which means that if you imagine this new Earth, what would it look like in terms of health? Well, everybody's going to be healthy. Good, so let's have lots of hospitals here, and let's focus on what we eat and how we treat our bodies, etc., so that we can live as much of this new Earth even in the middle of the old one. But it also extends to education. Are people going to be ignorant in the new Earth? Well, no. Then let's have schools that will help people understand the truth of how the world works and the laws that God created, etc. And about the new Earth, something else that's very strong in Adventism is the idea that the material is good. God created the world, and each day he said, this is good. And then the next day, this is good, this is good. All the other religions, all the other Christian denominations, let's say, they borrow from Plato, right? So Plato said that the material is bad and the spiritual is good, this non-material world. And when Augustine, in the 3rd, 4th century, borrowed from Plato and read the Bible from the point of view of Plato, from then on the Catholic Church and then the Protestants thereafter and even the Orthodox, what is material is bad. So the point of the whole Bible is to escape this world and go somewhere else.
That's what I grew up with.
Yeah, Adventists say, no, that's not what we see. Material is good, God created it, and in the end he's going to recreate this earth. And, you know, looking at the New Jerusalem, if you kick those pearly gates, it will hurt. It's very real. So those are some of the foundational principles of why Adventists invest in hospitals and schools and churches and humanitarian work and all of that.
Oh, the other big thing that seems to differ from bog standard Christianity is they don't believe that non-believers spend an eternity in hell. They sort of just burn up all at once and disappear.
There is no version of them that continues. No, they're dead.
So, no eternal suffering, which for me, a non-believer, is pretty good news. I mean, they believe what I already believe. I die, and I just cease to exist. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about Seventh-day Adventists?
Most people don't know it, so they probably confuse us with the Mormons. That's
what I did.
That's a very common one.
Sorry, it's probably quite annoying for you. Like, we're not Mormons, we're not that.
Yeah, it's different. And the other one is they confuse us with Jehovah's Witnesses. And there is a reason, you know, we're all started around the same time, and we have similar memberships, and we all believe we need to reach the whole world. And although Adventism is probably closer to Christianity, most Christians no longer consider Adventists to be a sect or a cult, although many do, but it's no longer the prevailing thing. While Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, sometimes people still have that concept about them. But mostly nobody knows about us. We're the best kept secret that no one knows about. That's how we feel sometimes.
I can't help but think that's sort of a weird thing to say. If Flightless Bird had 22 million listeners, I'd feel pretty happy about it. So Sam breaks down his thoughts on the success, or otherwise, of Seventh-day Adventists.
The positive is it's going well. For every McDonald's in the world, there are 4 Adventist congregations. So from that perspective, it's very broad. We are in 215 countries and territories, so pretty much in every country and territory of the world. And 2 million students in our educational system. There are hundreds of hospitals. Just in the US alone, 15 million patients a year. It's a really big from that perspective. Outside of the Catholics, we have the largest education and the largest hospital system, health system in the world. In the US, it's the most diverse denomination, people from basically all walks of life. So that's the positive side. On the negative side, our mission is to communicate the everlasting gospel to every human being alive. So 22 million Adventists is nothing compared to the 8 billion people in the world. How do we communicate with Muslims in countries that it's illegal to have a Bible, for example? So they're in urban centers where nobody talks to anybody anymore. And we try our best through radio and television. We have more than 900 channels around the world show Adventist content, thousands of radio stations as well. But when you look at the overall mission of every man, woman, and child needs to hear that God has not given up on them, man, there's a long way to go because most people don't even know that we exist.
And with that, it's time to go and watch a movie. As I said earlier, it's called The Hopeful. Like all movies I watch, I go in knowing as little as possible. I don't even know what genre it is. And look, spoiler alert, turns out, in my opinion, it's not that great. I learned afterwards it was originally a web series which was edited into a feature film later on in the process. It's a straight, pretty badly written drama about the origins of the church. Unlike, say, The Passion of the Christ, it doesn't have A-list actors or an incredible cinematographer. But who am I to belittle a narrative film? I haven't even made one, so I'll shut up. Here's a bit of the trailer, so you get the idea.
I come before you today to tell you that I have been shown in vision.
Father Miller's message was light.
The Advent people were traveling on a path toward a bright and holy city.
This is not the first time the end of the world has been prophesied by a fool, nor will it be the last. If you do not renounce these radical ideas, you will not be welcome here in this house of worship.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Support for Flightless Bird comes from Rocket Money. Now, can you name every single subscription that you have? I know I can't name more than about 2 of mine, and I've got a lot more than 2. And I know I'm not alone in this. I just learned that over 74% of people have subscriptions they've completely forgotten about. But with Rocket Money, you don't have to remember every single subscription or worry about forgetting because you can see them all laid out right in front of you. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. You can see all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money's going. For any you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them with a few taps, which is what I think is really great. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money's going. You can also get alerts if bills increase in price. We know that can happen if there's unusual spending activity or if you're close to going over your budget. Rocket Money will even try to sort out lower bills for you, sometimes by up to 20%. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save. Then you can ask them to negotiate it for you. They'll deal with the customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in cancelled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. So, stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/bird. That's rocketmoney.com/bird, rocketmoney.com/bird. I've realized a couple of things so far. First up, I can't just talk to the communications expert for a religion. While I'm really happy the church put someone forward to talk about them, even after we'd sort of called them a cult, I needed to look further. For one thing, a church spokesperson is going to be biased, and they just kind of know too much. As I explained earlier, it's hard to talk to a believer about what makes their religion tick because they're too into it. The conversation gets too inside of baseball and suddenly you're talking about the celestial plane and what happens to your soul and why Saturdays are more important than Sundays. So I decided to talk to someone else.
Have you noticed people pronounce it Adventist or Adventist? Because where I live and everybody that I know, we pronounce it Adventist. And I've always, kind of looked down on the people who pronounce it Adventist. But then I noticed that there were some Adventists who pronounced it that way. And I'm like, is this just regional? I don't know.
Anna is one of the many people who'd messaged me about the topic, but she had a different take. She'd been a card-carrying member of the religion, but left back in 2018. She's no longer a believer, so I wanted her take as an outsider. But first, a diversion. And there's a point to this, I promise. This all came up because I wanted to know what her job was.
I mostly work with American Girl dolls and take pictures of them for the American Girl Company.
I can't believe we're doing a podcast about American culture and you just dropped that. Can you please expand on this a little bit?
Okay, so every girl in the 80s and 90s through now basically grew up with American Girl dolls.
She totally gets me. We're friends for all time. My American Girl. Hey, watch us.
The new My American Girl doll is
sporty, funny, creative.
Because you get to decide what she's like.
We like to do all the same things. From soccer to helping to learning to sing.
It was a company founded in the 80s by a woman who wanted to create a doll that wasn't a Barbie, wasn't a baby doll. And she teamed up with her writer best friend who wrote stories about girls from all throughout American history. And they created a doll and all of the accessories that were mentioned in each of these books. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful world.
A woman called Pleasant Rowland, which sounds like a made-up name, founded American Girl in 1986. 12 years later, Mattel bought it for $700 million, which is a lot of money now, but even more back in 1998.
They're 18 inches. Their whole point is to mimic girlhood and girlhood throughout all of history. So you have every kind of pet, you have every kind of school supplies from all different eras.
Okay, so what does American Girl have to do with the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Look, it's a bit of a stretch, but the religion was co-founded by an American girl. Not a doll, but an actual American girl, Ellen G. White.
I'm curious how much you know about Ellen White and the start of the church and the history of it.
I explained I knew, as usual on this podcast, next to nothing. But I was here to learn about the founder of the religion, Ellen G. White.
She was a young girl. She got hit in the head with a rock by some other little girl in Victorian times. And Ellen White was 9 years old at this time, and she kind of blacked out for about 3 weeks. She was in a sort of coma. And that's not good. That can cause some brain trauma. And I don't know much about her for the next few years, but I know when she was a teenager, she started to have visions from God. And it informed this church of Seventh-day Adventism.
So, a girl got hit in the head with a rock, then decided to get into religion. She started having a lot of visions, and those around her said she had the gift of prophecy. And over her lifetime, Ellen White claims she had around 2,000 visions which informed this new American religion.
So from there, Ellen just keeps having visions and prophecies, and she is a prolific writer. She writes about vegetarianism and all of its wonderful things. She talks about how masturbation will cause cancer and a lot of stuff like that. And what I have found about Ellen White is that she's kind of silly. Do you know much about John Harvey Kellogg?
We did a serial episode, and I know that he was a very conservative man.
Okay, he was an Adventist. And he wrote a book, and this book was so popular. It was on all the shelves of everybody, everywhere. And he spoke about how vegetarianism and a bland diet specifically, like vegetarian plus no mustard, no cinnamon, no cloves, no pepper, will take away the sexual misconduct of the world. And he wrote about how to catch your kids masturbating. And he's also the reason why people get circumcised in America now who aren't religious. So there's a lot of stuff about Kellogg. And he and White, I believe, were friendly with each other. And so I found that a lot of her writings kind of mimicked what he wrote as well, and back and forth. And Ellen White also had a lot of divinely inspired visions about the planets and science that are completely not true. Yeah, she's a weird one.
Yeah, hit on the head by a rock when she was 9. For Anna, growing up in the church meant a big focus on diet and health, which is what I'd seen in Loma Linda. But it also meant a lot of time thinking about something pretty heavy for a kid, the end of the world. Because like evangelical Christianity, Seventh-day Adventists really like focusing on Armageddon.
Adventists have Revelation seminars, week-long seminars. That was so much of my childhood, where a few times a year, go to church on the big screen, the horns and the beasts coming out of the water. And I'm just like, what is going on here? There's a lot of emphasis on Revelation and the end times. Basically, I thought that the world was going to end within my lifetime because every Adventist has told me Jesus is coming soon. Ellen White fully believed Jesus is coming soon. He's coming in the next couple of years. She would constantly have these visions and thoughts that he's coming around the corner, so you got to be ready. And so I think that's why there's such an emphasis in Adventism about mission work and spreading as much of God's message to every corner, because once every corner has been reached, he will be coming soon. And for me as a kid, that meant that I thought that the sky was going to turn red, that I would be martyred.
Being martyred is quite a weird thing for a kid to be thinking about, but I guess that's just what you do when you're raised in this kind of religion. I suppose everyone takes different things from it. When I was talking to that PR person, he made it sound like Armageddon wasn't all that stressful. But Anna's experience hearing about the end of the world sounded quite full on.
I remember a story about this family being hanged for being Christian. And I asked my mom, is this going to happen to me? And she's like, well, if it does, it's okay. I'll be blowing you kisses from watching you go up into the gallows. And then the next thing you know, you're going to be with God and it's going to be okay. And so I had this really strong sense of duty as a kid.
Hearing her talk about her lived experience in this particular religion, well, I can sort of see why she left. Another core memory of hers is listening to Seventh-day Adventist children's stories, which are a bit different to the Disney narratives a lot of kids get.
So there was a guy named Eric B. Hare, who was a missionary, I think, in the early 20th century. And he made cassette tape audio recordings of all of his mission stories in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. And most of his stories are they're racially insensitive and very disturbing regarding just how graphic they are. They're mostly about obedience. Then there was this one story about a boy named Loving Water who disobeyed his parents and went and saw a great big elephant outside of his village. And this elephant cut open his stomach with a tusk. And this little boy is gushing with blood, running home to his family, screaming for his parents. And his father comes out and he looks at him. And then he wisely says, I know what causes that kind of gushing mark on my son's body. That was an elephant, and you disobeyed us. And I'm no longer going to call you Loving Water. I'm going to call you Mr. Crooked Ears. And to sum up this whole story, Eric B. Hare comes on and says, now listen here, little kids. I'm going to tell your parents to call you Mr. Crooked Ears too if you disobey them. But if you're good, I'm going to tell them to call you Loving Water. They're so strange. They're on YouTube. You should listen to like one.
And so I did. And yeah, they're pretty weird.
We had a pet hen called Cluck Cluck. When she was sitting on her first nest of eggs, I often called in to see her and would say, well, Cluck Cluck, how are you this morning? Is everything quite all right? And Cluck Cluck would say, cluck, 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 cluck.
Pretty weird. And it got me thinking, are they a cult? And for all of Anna's qualms with her religion, she says they're not.
My feathers kind of ruffle when I hear like Adventism as a whole is a cult, because that's actually not true. Ted Wilson is the president and he was elected, and I don't love him, but he was at least elected and he doesn't have very much power.
With that question answered, it was time to let Anna get back to things and her life as an American Doll aficionado. Before I wrap this doc up, I wanted to circle back to something else the church's PR man had told me, food related, because in America, it all seems to come back to food.
So there is a phenomena in America for Adventism in America called haystacks. Now, I did not grow up with haystacks in Brazil. In Europe, there are no haystacks. But in Australia, apparently, there are haystacks in Adventism. And what is it? It's basically a taco salad. It's the weirdest thing. We usually, after worship every Sabbath morning, we stay in the church. And often it's haystacks that we eat. It's basically Fritos or Doritos, although there's a whole war between the Fritos people and the Doritos. This is serious stuff, David. So then you put the Doritos, and the order that you put that stuff really matters to people. So you need to put the beans and then the cheese so it melts in the beans, and then you have the salad on top and lettuce and sometimes veggie meat, whatever. It's a whole thing. I don't understand it completely. I take part in it because what else are you going to eat? But American Adventists take that, it's very serious stuff for them.
I felt like I'd learned a lot during this episode. It's strange ground to cover, taco bowls with Fritos through to Armageddon and martyrdom. Only in America is a phrase I often end up thinking while working on this podcast. And in this case, maybe it checks out.
I believe that God started this in America because of its potential to reach the world. It's in English. America would, although it wasn't clear in the 19th century when it started, 1800s, that America would be a prominent, it was still an early experiment. But God did know that it would expand, and the expansion of American culture and American presence and the English language and so on, I think that's why God chose America to be the ones who would start this movement. That to me is what makes most sense.
Such an incredibly American statement to end on. And I really liked him. I liked him a lot more than I thought I would. But just this concept of, God chose America because it's got to be English and can just be the ones that will spread things out to the rest of the world, which coming from New Zealand, I kind of get that mentality because growing up, we looked to America for everything when it came to pop culture and probably religion as well. Anyway, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I do like their philosophy on people's bodies and the world and preserving it. My interpretation of a lot of religions is that it's like, don't even really worry about that. You're going to leave your body and your soul's going to go and just discard the earth, the planet. Like there's this kind of environmental undertone of it that I do like.
It's something I'm sort of obsessed with here in this certain level of like Christian nationalism. And you see it in New Zealand as well. Climate change denial is such a big thing. But it kind of, in certain aspects of sort of old school Christianity, it marries up so well with climate change denial because they don't really give a shit about the planet. Because there's this idea that
we're going to leave it. We're going to die. And
so who cares if it's burning? We're going to be out of here. So let's not worry about it. Let's focus on this other stuff. So it was so nice to hear him saying, no, this is why we look after our bodies and we look up to the earth because they're not going anywhere. And we're going to stay on earth. It's just going to be upgraded.
Yeah. I mean, to me, though, religion is always kind of felt as just a way to trick people into behaving a certain way. We've had this debate, even Natalie and I, with raising the boys.
What do you tell them?
There is a foundation of morality that you can get from religion.
100%. And I mean, I agree. I think a lot of the reasons, like a lot of my values came from being raised. And I really respect the way my parents raised me, whilst really disliking a lot of the weird baggage that comes with religion, right? Like a fear of hell.
Yeah, you knowing what's right or wrong in your mind is not dependent on you thinking the Virgin Mary or Jesus or any of these things. But it also, I think you can have these ideas about caring for the planet and your body and not have to have it wrapped up in like, if you don't, you're going to burn up and just disappear after you die.
And there's also the tricky thing, I'm curious with your kids, because they'll go off to school and they'll be talking to other kids who have religious beliefs, and how do your kids interact with them? Look, I don't have children, but the idea of figuring out how to communicate ideas like that to them, because you don't want them to be giving shit to other kids at school that do have really strong beliefs, but also you don't want them to be suddenly scared of going to hell because some kid's been like, what? You don't know about this religion? That means you're going to go to hell forever.
Yeah, I don't love the idea of that, of just like you being uninformed and you're blindly putting your faith in something that you decide.
Are you watching Chaos on Netflix at the moment? It's basically Greek myths retold in a modern setting, and Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus. And it's very much about how religion has been set up to control people on Earth. Yeah. And it's a very, not a particularly new idea, but it certainly plays into it. And it's funny because I am really on board. As I was learning about this religion, I'm like, if I was going to go back to Christianity, I think maybe Seventh-day Adventism would be the thing for me. But I was also fascinated by the fact that the member that had left for many of the same reasons I left Christianity, being a Baptist, which was just like, God, I hate being scared of all this shit. So it still does that. Certain aspects of it still do that to kids,
Yeah. I mean, I think that was what it was for me, is like, I love the idea of religion and like what people can get out of it. But as a foundation, and when you start layering on these rules and fears and shame, then it starts to get a little more dangerous and tricky.
Yeah, especially if you're on the edges of society, if you're gay or trans or something, like those things are going to be much more of an issue for you within those groups than if you're just some like cis white dude going through life normally.
Well, and it makes it
normally.
But it's then tied to their identity too. Their identity is this religion, while this person's identity is this. And like, it shouldn't be that combative with
not
one
at
another.
all.
They're not relevant. They're not relevant to one another.
And the other thing all throughout this episode, it's about the fate of your soul, right? And yet you're also talking about how, we like to get together and have haystacks and arguing about whether it's with like Fritos or Doritos. So there's this element of, whenever you're diving into these religious topics, there's the biggest things imaginable butting up against these trivial little tiny, very funny things. And I don't know, my point is, I just find all of this so fascinating.
Did you do treats after your church your
There were
Baptist church?
treats. I mean, youth group was a big thing.
Yeah.
And recruiting kids to youth group was basically all about treats. You'd go to youth group because you'd have pizza or McDonald's or a movie. It's all treats.
The first church I went to as a kid, they do donuts after Mass.
Oh, incredible.
That was like my favorite part of it was, race over to the donuts. And I mean, the community aspect of it all is great too.
100%. That's the other thing in a society that is less and less community focused. That is something religion gives people. And I know I've had friends that have left Christianity later in life. And suddenly if they've got kids, they're like, holy shit, where's my community? Where's my people? And it does give you that base, which is another super positive thing from these things. But yeah, it's like a constant balancing act of like, do I want that negative stuff or positive stuff? And also just what you believe in, right? I'm curious, I imagine a lot of Flight This Bird listeners, they're probably, I don't know, there'll be religious ones, there'll be agnostic ones. I'm curious if any Seventh-day Adventist people are listening, because I'm curious what they even make of the way we're talking about them. Because for them, it's their entire reality.
But they seem to have a pretty impressive street team of people that are proselytizing.
Yeah, the speed at what they messaged, they got my email and they were DMing me. And the amazing thing was, it was all positive. They were just like, we just want to talk to you about this thing. Here's my number. We'll do an interview with you. It was insane.
That is a nice change of pace from what you would expect from people thinking you're misrepresenting something tied to their identity.
Not one Seventh-day Adventist messaging me going, how dare you even raise the idea that we might be a cult. There was none of that. And good on them from my perspective. It made me go, oh, maybe these guys are okay,
I did have a question of when a religion isn't a cult anymore. It's essentially just the time of existing and the amount of people that follow it.
The thing with a cult, and it gets so difficult to distinguish sometimes, it all comes down to whether everything is being run by one person. So a lot of these religious groups, they'll have boards, they'll have people, the decision-making is shared, and so they get out of that cult-like.
So, but then it's just organizational structure and not actual philosophy and what you believe. Because to me, a cult is a group of people that are all believing in something together.
It is that, but it has to have that one person that rules with an iron fist. It has to be that one thing. So I think Scientology is an interesting one, because a lot of people would call that a cult because L. Ron Hubbard was right at the top controlling that thing. And, right now it's, what's his name? David Miscavige. So that's why that gets cult pointed at it so
if we just
vehemently.
If we got 6 people together and decided to run the board of a belief system, it would not be a cult because there's a group of us that are deciding. And
yeah, it would have to be.
It seems like a weird line to draw that, like, it's just because it's one person versus
and it's
a
blurry.
group of people.
And I mean, and when I look at some of the big megachurch structures and the way that pastors run a place, in my mind, I'm like, oh no, you're a cult. It's the same thing. It's money funding from the bottom right up to the top. It's identical. But when it comes to their tax status and the way the state treats them, religion spreads pretty widely.
Did you have fears of Armageddon when you were a kid too?
Big time.
Yeah, I did too. I kind of forgot about that because it's gone away.
Let's bring it all back.
But yeah, the visions of red sky, fiery,
super dramatic. It was all very practical. And I mean, I was raised with this idea that there was a spiritual battle waging parallel to the real world, which is a really exciting thing because it's like everything suddenly took on all this added meaning. But it also meant that, at some point, and not 500 years away, 10 or 20 years away.
Yeah, I remember thinking it was always, especially growing up in the era where 2000, Y2K is happening.
Oh, yeah.
Where like, oh, this is the religious reckoning. And then again, it was like 2012, there was another symbolic year that like this is when Jesus is coming back.
Well, that would end up being a movie, right? 2012. I think it was all built into the culture. Yeah, it's an odd thing to be a kid, and being a kid is stressful enough, worrying about pimples and what girls think of you, what guys think of you. Oh, and also like this is all going to end, and there's going to be a big fight between Satan and God.
I do remember having anxiety around this is coming. Is this actually?
Oh, so we had such a similar thing. And it's interesting because, you being in Catholicism, me being a Baptist, the American Girl aficionado, being a Seventh-day Adventist, also being worried about Armageddon. These are all fears that these forms of Christianity gave us. So we all come from that same place.
That's what just brings me back to, like, these are all just mechanisms in which people are trying to cope with how the fuck to live on Earth and deal with death that is approaching.
We've talked about this before, like how ridiculous the premise is that we are all here with zero idea of how we got here or where we're going. It's so stressful and so weird, and we busy ourselves by making podcasts and raising families and trying to make our lives meaningful with no idea of what the fuck is going on.
Well, and I do love the idea of people being able to find comfort in that.
It just sucks that all that built-in fear comes with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I feel like I know a lot more than when I entered this journey. I'm not going to convert, but I think I'm warmer to the Seventh-day Adventists now than I was before.
I have a question that might help with your conversion. Are there any famous Seventh-day Adventists?
That is a really good question. Not that I know of. Let's do a little Google. Are you saying that I only follow?
I mean, if you found out that Louis Theroux was a Seventh-day Adventist, are you saying
I'm converting instantly.
Yeah. Or Carl
Pilkington. Seventh-day Adventists famous members. Thank you, Google. Little Richard.
Wow.
Ben Carson. Malcolm X?
Is this right?
A lot of names I don't know. Well, look, this is from sources across the web. I'm just going on Google here. Malcolm X, we need to confirm whether that's true or not. Say Rob has now taken over the laptop.
This says Magic Johnson is also a Seventh-day Adventist.
Magic Johnson! He came and played a sort of like an All-Stars game in New Zealand when I was about 9, and I was blown away by him. It also has Alan G. White, the co-founder, listed as a famous one. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go immediately.
All right, before we go, it's time for our mailbag.
I should also just quickly say Rosabelle just texted me. She just listened to the Dolphins episode, which we're about to do a mailbag for now. She says, wow, I hate my accent. I heard it on your podcast. Your and Rob's voice, good. Mine is bad.
What if that was the first time she heard her voice? Because I think we've gotten used to it.
You get used to it. Yeah, I mean, no one loves hearing their own voice. It's awful. This might be the first time, and she's now having some issues.
She's wrong. Her voice is lovely.
Her voice is incredible.
Yeah.
It's a dreamy
very
voice.
Soothing,
Rosabelle.
like she should have a meditation app where she just reads.
Rosabelle, if you're listening to this episode, you're okay. Now, there was so much feedback to the Navy Dolphins episode.
Yeah, there's some really timely stuff that happened around the release of that episode.
There were a lot of compliments first to you, Rob. People like you. People said more Rob, and they said more Rosabelle. There's no feedback about me. It was just basically more Rob, more Rosabelle. Also, there was a lot of feedback about how I said Neve, not Nev.
Yeah.
Remember Neve Campbell?
Yeah.
And someone reminded me that former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's daughter is called Neve, and it's pronounced Neve, not Nev. So I think what I had done as a New Zealander, my brain had just gone Neve, as opposed to, this only matters to me.
You're just defending yourself.
I'm defending myself.
Your pronunciation
for
of
saying
someone's name
Neve
wrong.
Campbell, not Nev Campbell. All right. Now, in regards to the Navy Dolphins, we mentioned the former Russian spy beluga. It died last week. So basically, as that episode came out, it was found passed away. The cause of death is unknown. Of course, some could argue possibly a US Navy dolphin had been sent out to assassinate it.
I think that's probably the most likely scenario.
Port officials transported his body to a cooling facility after it was found, and it's undergoing an autopsy as we speak. It was found off Norway. The results will be ready in several weeks, which by the time this is broadcast will probably be this coming week. So just wanted to note that Russia's spy beluga whale has passed away. Okay, we were talking about other animals being used as weapons, and I mentioned that sharks would be a possible good use. And turns out that the Navy did experiment with using sharks as weapons.
Well, they made a movie about it, Deep Blue Sea.
Which is, if you haven't seen Deep Blue Sea, it is an incredible film. There's an article by Mary Roach. The headline, following World War II, scientists sought to use sharks as bomb delivery systems, strapping explosives to their heads. Under a secret Navy-funded project, scientists tried to use lemon sharks to deliver bombs to enemy targets. Now, I just want to read a little bit from her piece because it blew my mind. So this is Mary
pun intended.
Roach. There was absolutely no pun intended. So she wrote, the shark struck me as an unusual choice. Dolphins are more intelligent and better suited to captivity and training. Why not use dolphins?
So they were just using kamikaze shark because the shark's not delivering that bomb and then getting away safely.
No, they're absolutely kamikaze sharks. That's what they were trying to do.
Some animal cruelty.
So this is the reason the Navy thought that sharks would be better than dolphins. Number one, they're stealthier. Unlike the clicking, whistling, and generally loud dolphin, the shark is silent. It has no organ for making sounds.
Except for that dun-dun, dun-dun, that soundtrack that comes with it.
So lame. It also stays out of sight. Sharks don't leap from the water as dolphins do, nor can you see a shark on sonar because it has no swim bladder. When sonar sees a fish, what it sees is the gas in this built-in buoyancy aid. The body of a fish is mostly water. Sonar detects mismatches in density, so the rest of the fish, or the entirety of a shark, remains hidden. I thought that was mind-blowing.
So you're Team Shark now?
So far, I absolutely am. The other reason to use sharks, perhaps the most compelling reason of all, was that the marine labs were already set up for them. Years of Navy-funded shark and shark repellent research meant there were pens and tanks and harnesses and lots of specialized shark know-how, where to procure sharks at a quantity discount, whatever the hell that means, what to feed them, how to put them under. Okay, so those are the good things about sharks. So what they did, it was called Project Headgear, and it was an attempt to turn sharks into bomb delivery systems. The shark would simply carry the explosives close enough to the target, and it would be destroyed when the bomb detonated. This article's so amazing, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, they tried to shock the shark. So they'd shock it this way, it would turn left. Shock it that way, it's going to turn right.
Like a remote control for the shark.
No, that's exactly it. They were remote controlling sharks. Why it failed and didn't work was because of the shark's inability to respond to prolonged electrical stimulation. So basically, if the shock was too weak, the shark ignored it. If it was strong enough to elicit a response, it was the wrong response. The response was radical and even violent movements.
I mean, I would also imagine that training a shark is a little more dangerous than training a dolphin.
Yeah, I mean, they had the pens and they had the shark repellent, but yeah, you can't get in the water with a great white or a lemon shark.
Rip you apart, where I don't think there's a lot of dolphin attacks.
But like, does this blow your mind? I brought it up kind of as a joke, training sharks, but the Navy was desperately trying to train them via electric shocks to the head to be a bomb delivery system, which I found amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, I guess it's cheaper labor than just building like a little submarine that's delivering it?
Again, that's kind of the thing. Like, surely with the amount of resources going into these sharks, you would just build a little submarine.
Yeah, that you can actually control with a remote control versus trying
to... But the thing, sharks off the radar. They can't be seen. They can't be seen by sonar. They're quiet. So I guess all those advantages, if it worked to deliver a bomb.
Yeah, it's the stealthiness.
Yeah, until like the last second, until the explosion, they don't know it's coming.
Yeah, I don't think PETA and people that are against animal cruelty would love that, though, either.
That's the other thing. It would be an absolute PR nightmare. If the US Navy is found out to be just blowing up sharks willy-nilly, that's not a great look. And finally, we talked about Alaska, and someone wrote in, my sister lives in Palmer, Alaska, and her husband has a dog sled team. So we can apparently go and join in the future if we want to do that.
Sounds like we're going dog sled racing.
I would love to dog sled race with you. See, if you have any feedback, slide into my DMs. I always want to hear about what I got right and wrong. And if you have any other thoughts on Seventh-day Adventists, reach out. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
See you next week. All right, Calvin, what do you think a Seventh-day Adventist is?
I don't know.
If you had to guess something, what would you say?
Maybe going to dentist on the 7th day.
Close.